Welcome back to the Spatial Connection, the podcast where we explore the fascinating journeys of geospatial professionals and dive into the incredible ways location-based technologies are shaping our world. I'm your host, Kellen McGee, and today's guest is Aaron Addison. Aaron's a returning guest, but today, instead of learning about his journey, which we've already done, we're going to learn a little bit about cave mapping. Join me as we learn about how Aaron got involved with cave mapping and what's involved with it. This is going to be an exciting one. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are going to talk about something a little bit different. We're not going to be doing a career story. Today, I'm going to have Aaron Addison back with us. And Aaron's going to talk a little bit about mapping caves. Aaron's got a lot of experience on this side and, kind of knew this. And we were very excited to get him back on the show and give us a little bit of insight about what it is to map a cave and how that has evolved over time and how maybe GIS interplays with it as well. Well, Aaron, welcome back to the podcast. Glad to have you back.
Thanks, Billy. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So why don't we do this? I know for some of those that may have not heard your story, your episode before, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also how did you get involved with mapping caves? And we'll kind of go from that point.
Yeah, thanks. That's a long and winding tale, almost as complicated as mapping caves itself. But we have our different ways of learning things here in the Midwest, of which I'm a lifelong resident in Southern Illinois and nowadays in the St. Louis area. But we have the library book to blame for all of this, as it turns out. When I was in high school down outside of Carbondale, Illinois, went to the local university there, SIU, and was literally just walking down the roads and picked up a book about cave exploration and noticed there were some other books about caving on either side of that book. And, before I knew it, I was sitting on the floor reading them. And the next thing I remember is, being kicked out of the library because it was closing time. And I was certainly hooked as something that I wanted to learn more about. Of course, at that time, I had no idea it would become a lifelong passion. But here we are well over 30 years later, and I'm still doing it. So safe to say that I got the bug in caves and caving and cave exploration and mapping have been a part of my life ever since.
That's awesome. So did that kind of help shape how you, what you decided to go to university for?
In a roundabout way, I guess. I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, and my earliest memories with maps were when I think maybe we talked about this on the last podcast, but just looking at random Galley atlases, exploring the unknown, tracing the lines, discovering places and locations. And caves are really an extension of that. How do you go into a place where you can't see what's going on and try to understand it, try to depict it visually, try to do science in that environment, try to make sure you're doing everything responsibly and safely at the same time. And, and of course, not getting lost, not getting hurt, not breaking formations, not touching things you shouldn't be touching, etc. And so, yeah, I guess, one of the things that I always have been mindful of in my day job and in geospatial is that what can I learn from what's happening in this professional industry called geospatial that I can take then back to documenting caves, understanding caves around the world, and adding to the scientific record.
Yeah, I definitely could see the mapping of a cave being different than a typical mapping of a neighborhood or what we think of our cities and such. You would think that it'd be easy because it's kind of a known area, but it's not so well known as I believe I understand things. And I think you mentioned earlier that you don't see what you're going to map. It's a lot of,
Yeah.
It's going to be dark down there. There's a lot of other environmental factors that make it much different than mapping, say, a city. So I can imagine that's got to be a bit of a challenging task as well.
For sure. I think caves by their nature are typically very hostile environments. They're certainly hostile to things like electronics, things that we take for granted on the surface. When you take electronic survey instruments and start knocking them on rocks and dropping them down cracks and the floor and getting them wet and muddy, they don't survive. And so sometimes just because it's possible to do something like the technology, it might be preferable to do something in a very sort of manual, basic way, using either a compass and a tape, rather than trying to get some fancy electronic distance meter to work properly. Uh, you add on top of that the colder temperatures, the fact that you do have a dynamic environment, where you don't want to be in the cave if it's going to rain, for flooding and other reasons. It's really this sort of complex problem that you're solving in real time in order to understand a truly three-dimensional space. When we survey above ground, we're surveying for the most part in 2 dimensions. Yeah, we might do some topographic or something like that, but when you're surveying in tunnel systems, it's quite different in terms of all the things you're trying to depict on the map. Because if you look at something like bats, their habitat's actually on the ceiling, not on the floor. So when you draw the map, are you drawing the ceiling or are you drawing the floor? Because if you want to study bats, then you need to really be thinking about drawing all the nuances and features on the ceiling and the high walls and not so much on the floor. But if you're studying hydrology, you don't really care too much about the ceiling and you want to know what's happening on the floor. So you have to understand what's fit for purpose, how people are using these maps, after the fact. And whether you're doing it in geospatial, doing any cave mapping, the map is just the beginning. It's not the end. It's only once we get that map that it can be used for science, it can be used for management, it can be used for all those downstream activities. But it all starts with sort of a base map and understanding, whatever it is that you're trying to document.
Very interesting. So how old were you when you did your first cave mapping project?
It's probably going back to 16 or 17 years old, just a small cave in Southern Illinois. Found out about it, talking to some people, and we had no idea what we were doing. I took a spiral bound notebook, I took a protractor and a pencil, and that was about it. And I didn't really know how to approach it. I certainly had no training, but we were excited and wanted to try to figure this thing out. We quickly found out how difficult it was to do without any training, and certainly to do it properly. And so we wanted to make sure that we, if we were going to go to the effort of doing it, we wanted to understand it and we would do it properly. And that got us connected to the local caving club in Carbondale with people who had much more experience doing these kinds of things than we did when we started that process of learning the techniques, learning what works, what doesn't work, and really standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us to try to understand these unique natural resources.
So is there a fairly large cave? I guess one of the things we want to probably establish is how do you refer to somebody that maps caves? Are they cavers, or how do you properly address someone?
So people may have heard the term spelunker, cavers. Even if you're really into it, you may have heard the term speleologist, which is a European origin term for people who study caves. Cavers call themselves cavers. Cavers who, see people who aren't cavers going caving, we call spelunkers. But so, another way to think about that over the time is cavers rescue spelunkers. Spelunkers don't rescue cavers. But it does bring up the safety aspect, which I want to make sure we hit on here as well.
Yes.
I know you guys had brought that up in our pre-conversation, and really there are resources at the national and local level through the National Speleological Society, which is the nationwide association of cavers. Some probably 10 or 15,000 members in that organization from coast to coast and even international that are dedicated to studying and understanding caves. And even here locally, we have a number of caving clubs that are called grottos. Merrimack Valley probably being the largest of those in the St. Louis area. But Well, I'll offer you some links that we can include in the show notes so that people can get connected. If they want to
Perfect.
visit caves, it's very important that you do that safely and responsibly, because these are essentially non-renewable resources, but moreover, safety concern. You don't want to put yourself in a situation that you can't get out of. And there are some very, good resources to avoid that. Can,
Yeah, we want people to enjoy it and not be harmed by it. So
yeah,
definitely follow any safety resources that are made available, and get in touch with some of these local communities, these clubs. I think that's a huge
yeah.
plus. So with some of this in mind, we're talking about mapping caves. Can you give us an ideal as, how many caves are we talking? We'll just talk about the U.S. We won't talk worldwide. From a U.S. perspective, you'd mentioned earlier in some of our discussions about how many caves were just in Tennessee alone in some of the areas. Can you give us some idea of what those quantities look like?
Sure. So there are caves known from every state in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. The caves here in the Midwest and Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, and Iowa, and then on down into Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, etc. Those are all limestone caves, and these caves are formed whenever water uh, lands on the limestone, rain and runoff and stuff, and then it dissolves the limestone through a chemical process over tens of thousands of years that create the caves that we see in our area. You can see if you drive down the bluff, you can see little potholes and rock and stuff like that. Those are the beginnings of caves in many regards. Or if you're walking down a creek and see a spring coming out of a hole in the ground, that's the water running out of the cave. So I think that's where the bulk of the caves are formed in the U.S. But if you go to places like Hawaii, certainly there are lava tubes that are formed very differently than the limestone caves. And within the limestones, we also have the dolomites, and we have marble caves out in California. And we have different types of caves in the Southwest called hypogene caves, which are being formed down sulfuric acid coming up from below instead of the rain coming down from the clouds. So quite a variety of ways that caves form. But to the numbers, we always talk. One of the questions that's a visitor center question, we call it, is how many miles of unexplored passage are there? It's like, well, if we knew that, it wouldn't be unexplored. And so it's like, how many caves are there? Well, if we knew that, then we would be done. But right now, I think we've documented probably between 40 to 50,000 caves in the United States. The most of which, people really know the most of it. I mean, Tennessee right now probably has the most documented caves, is something around, or maybe even over 10,000. And a state
Wow.
like Missouri would be in the 6 to 7,000 range. But interestingly, you just come across the river into Illinois and you're below 1,000.
Really?
People say, well, how can it be so low? It's like, well, because glaciers covered most of Illinois 10,000 years ago. And there may, in fact, be some caves down there, but they're under 500 feet of glacial tilling currently, and so until all that erodes away again, before the next period of glaciation in the Earth, you might see some more caves. But right now, and you can see this just looking at a topographic map, most of the caves in Illinois are found along the Mississippi River, where you tend to find more hills and areas maybe that were overlooked by the glaciation from the Wisconsin glaciers. But anywhere where you've got the flat farmland that's characteristically found in central and northern central Illinois, you're not going to find any caves. You just don't see any bedrock there. And again, if you do, it's going to be in a place like Starved Rock, where you've got the Illinois River cutting down through there. And there's some very interesting geology there. It's just not geology that we typically find in extensive cave systems.
So I guess this is a question too. How small of an opening can still be considered a cave?
So these definitions are left up to the state surveys typically. And so one definition might be very, sort of, it has to be 50 feet long, it has to be 50 feet deep or something. There would be some measurement put on that. Whereas another state might have language that says you have to be out of daylight. It has to be completely dark. And so things that we may conversationally call a cave might actually be more classified as something like a shelter block. So if that's a place like, oh, I know the Indians use that, and there's evidence of, all these kinds of things. Or if you go, especially if you go into Southern Illinois around like Giant City or in areas like that, south of there, Fern Bluff, especially state park, those would be more like shelters. Those wouldn't be true caves because you're not really going underground. You're still very much in the daylight. There might be a little bit of a rock overhang or something. Graham Cave here in Missouri is another great example of that. But they're not true caves. Say, well, I could climb down or I could rappel down a rope into a hole that's 200 feet deep and still see daylight. So it's not a cave. And so you have some nuance in the definitions of all these things. But as long as you have a definition, then you have a point of discussion. And the databases that track these things oftentimes will continue to track all those additional features. They just won't be included in that final published number of the number of caves. And the reason we do that, and this sort of crosses over into geospatial, is that way if somebody else reports the same feature, we know it's already in the database. We've already got a dot, we've already got a GPS location or some coordinates for that feature. So we're not getting the same features reported over and over and over again into the database.
So I guess that takes us to the next part of this. You get a cave. I guess, do you typically find yourself mapping a new cave, or is it more extending of what's already been mapped, what you know about a cave currently?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's all the above. Sometimes we discover new caves, and that's one of the things that really gets me most excited and most passionate about caving is that if you discover a brand new cave, you can legitimately say that you're the first human being that's ever seen that. Not just out of the 7 billion that are on Earth today, but in all time. And what's really crazy about that is that there are places within 100 miles of St. Louis where you can still do that. That there are still places to be discovered that no human being in the history of human beings has ever laid eyes on or stepped on. And that's pretty unique. Not very many places on the surface where you could say the same thing. And so that's really that thrill of discovery, being the first, documenting. We have a sort of a philosophy that's called map as you go. You don't want to run ahead and explore everything. You want the entire team on the survey to experience everything at the same time. So we try to document things as we go rather than just trying to run around all over the place and explore it all and then say, hey, we'll come back later and make the map, which of course never happens. And so that's one way. Excuse me. The other way, though, is sometimes maybe a cave was mapped 40 years ago using the state of the art of the day. The technology and techniques have improved, and it may warrant remapping the cave and documenting it again. So there's that scenario. And then your last one is that sometimes new discoveries are made. A new sinkhole opens or a new passage is discovered that wasn't previously known. And that'd be an example of extending an existing map into new realms.
So let's say you're getting ready to go out and do a new project. Can you kind of walk us through what is that like if you're, and I'm calling these projects, there may be another way you refer to these, but if you're going to do more mapping, what kind of tasks are involved with that? And maybe also what kind of preparation and equipment do you typically put together to go do a mapping project for a cave?
Well, first and foremost, you want to make sure you have permission to be on the land. Almost all of the caves in the Midwest certainly are owned by private landowners. And if you don't have their permission, then you're trespassing. And trespassing is trespassing, whether you're doing it for hunting and fishing or you're doing it for caving. And so you want to make sure you have the permission and you have good landowner relations, in order to visit these locations. But caving is, again, not unlike hunting or fishing, where there's a certain set of gear that every participant is expected to have. You need, you need a rod and reel to go fishing. You need boots and knee pads and a headlamp to go caving. And so there's some investment, and of course, just again, like hunting or fishing, you can either buy the entry level model or you can buy, the very advanced, more expensive versions of those same things. But if you're just getting started, you don't need all the fanciest of fancy gear. You just need something that's safe to use, and to follow some basic rules. So we have typically each person is responsible for bringing 3 independent sources of light. You have the light on your helmet. You have 2 more lights in your cave pack. So if one light fails, you still have a backup light to get out of the cave. And so it's partly about being responsible and also being prepared in the event that something goes wrong with the equipment that you have. Or maybe you just wind up spending more time in the cave than you had anticipated. You certainly don't want your batteries to run out or anything and still be a long way from the entrance, because that's going to result in a cave rescue, not a rescue where anybody was hurt necessarily or hopefully, but one where you went into the cave unprepared, and now you have to call on a rescue team to come find you because nobody knows what happened. And so, being prepared is an important part of them.
And I know I've been in some caves and some mine shafts, and the darkness you experience there is much different than the darkness you would experience out in the wilderness. So it's complete darkness.
Yeah, the caves are the absence of photons, right? One thing you did say there that I would caution people against is that we have a saying that mines cave in, caves don't mine in, and I would really actively discourage people from going in any abandoned mines. These environments are very young, very unstable, and very unsafe in most aspects. You think about a cave compared to a mine. The cave's been around for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. How many earthquakes have come and gone? Everything that can happen has happened to that cave, and it's still there. Whereas in a mine, an abandoned mine, you bump one little thing, and the next thing you know, the roof is caving in. And so they're very, very different experiences, and certainly would caution anybody contemplating going in mines to not do that, and find something
Always
else to
take
do
the
for
tour.
the day. Yeah, it's there are things things that you can do where you don't get do-overs if you have a bad day, and bad days can happen very quickly in some of those situations. So make sure that you're very mindful and safety conscious during it.
So you've got your safety gear, you've got your 3 sources of light. What's the mapping type of gear that you take with you?
Sure. So a mapping kit's going to involve a way to record notes and drawings. This is typically a small notebook. We use waterproof, tear-proof paper. Some of your listeners may have heard of products like Write in the Rain, that are used in waterproof field books and things like that. So you need a field book of some sort. Those can be bound. Those can be loose leaf. They might be a smaller notebook size, or they might be full 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that have been custom printed for cave survey. And then you need a way to record a distance, a azimuth or compass reading, and inclination, up and down. So basically, if you want to think about it in geospatial terms, what you're trying to do is create a 3-dimensional line fault of the cave. And so we know caves, again, if we compare that to surveying on the surface, most of what we do is very, very close to being planar. Yeah, there might be some up and down. I went up the hill, I went down the hill. But in a cave, because you're in a tunnel system that's 3-dimensional, you might have the up and down, but then it went down and came back under around the passage and connected on the other side. And now I have these complex 3-dimensional geometries. And so that's why we have to collect distance, azimuth, and inclination. In doing that, now we can plot how far we went, which direction we went, and if we went up or down. And doing that over and over again, it's like using a surveying term is traversing. And in a traverse, then we're creating a line fault. We have loops, we have side shots and everything. But all of these activities are to try to make the best representation of the cave as possible by plotting all of that out and then using a sketch, visual inspection sketch, to draw in all the features that you see in that caving. Of course, caving and cave mapping is also evolving with technology. So we see the advent of distance or distos, distance meters, have a laser return to give me my distance. And there are cavers who are working on customized hardware to be able to also use magnetometers to do digital compass readings, and then also do a digital compass and digital inclination. And these are getting better all the time. So now you could do, where you may have taken a sighting compass from Brunton or Sunto in the past. Now you would take one unit. They could take all three measurements and send those via Bluetooth back to the sketcher, and the sketcher may be doing digital sketch in specialized software, or they might be doing it straight into GIS, or they might be using information to add to the amount of detail that they have on the page in front of them.
So you're talking about the Bluetooth back to a sketcher. Do you typically have I guess, what is a typical team size? Is it like 2 or 3 people? What would you typically plan for?
Ideal, I would say, is 3, because then you have a person who's out front, you have a person in the back that's responsible for instrumentation, and then you have the sketcher. The sketcher role is also usually the team leader, because they're the one that's documenting the cave, so we're sort of calling the shots, so to speak. Having said that, you can certainly survey with 2 people, and you can certainly survey with 4 people. It just depends on the nature of the environment or the cave that you're trying to document. The main thing you want to try to do is to have things for people to do, jobs to do, because what you don't want to do is just have somebody who's sitting around all the time, because they're going to get bored, they're going to get cold, they're going to, not being enjoying the trip. So, keeping busy is the name of the game.
And I can imagine it's tedious work. I can imagine it takes quite a bit of time to do this correctly.
It does. So some survey trips can last, 10 to 15 hours underground,
Wow.
depending on where you're looking and what you're going. Usually it's controlled by what we call sketcher burnout. And so once the sketcher's brain is fried from trying to concentrate for too long, or maybe it's just their neck hurts from looking down and drawing all day for 10 hours or something like that, or somebody's not feeling well. These are all reasons that trips turn around. It's rarely, it does happen, but it's rare that you actually reach the end of the cave, and say, hey, we're all done here. That's usually not the case, because you're documenting these systems that are thousands of feet, if not miles long, all the way up to the world's longest known cave is actually down in Kentucky, in Mammoth Cave, where cavers over the past 60, almost 70 years have surveyed well over 425 miles of known passage.
Oh, wow.
And all of that was done by survey crews underground.
And I can imagine this, while it sounds simple that you're kind of walking into a cave, it's probably somewhat physically demanding.
It certainly can be. And, walking is a luxury. Sometimes you're either crawling on your hands and knees, where rocks, mud, water, you're squeezing through tight places, or sometimes you're just flat out crawling on your belly through water and gravel in the streamway, where the passage may only be 18 inches tall. And so you're still trying to collect data, you're still trying to sketch, you're still trying to take measurements in those types of possible environments, which is not only rough on the equipment, but also on the participants, the people who are on the team. And so that's where you get into some additional, specialized clothing, be it synthetics or things that are waterproof. And again, I'll use a hunting analogy here. Is like, you can go duck hunting with or without waders. And it all depends on where you're going to go duck hunting, right? And in the same kind of thing, you can go trout fishing with or without waders, but where you going trout fishing is going to determine on it. You don't have to own waders, but if you don't, you're going to have to walk out in the cold river or, or just find a different place. And so caving is very similar in that sense. You don't need all this equipment all the time, but there are times when we're, all the things I'm talking about here, we're serving actually in wetsuits because you want to stay warm and then get hypothermic in the area.
Yeah, definitely can imagine it gets quite chilly in some of those caves.
Yeah. So caves are interesting because the temperature of a cave is whatever the above ground average temperature is. So here in the St. Louis region, our average above ground temperature is 54, 55 degrees for any given year. So all the caves in our region are 50 to 55 degrees. And if you go up north where the average above ground temperature is colder, I'll say go up into Montana, their average above ground temperature for a year might be 38 degrees. So all the caves are going to be 38 degrees. The water in the cave is going to be 38 degrees, et cetera. So that's where you really start getting into the more technical work. And if you've ever been into a cenote or been down in Mexico and gone into a cave, you'll say, oh, it's a lot warmer. Well, that's because the average above ground temperature is much, much warmer in the tropics than it is here in the Midwest. So you'll get, cave temperatures that might even be 70 degrees or more. And the water in those caves is 70 degrees or more.
Wow.
So, it definitely is tied to the above ground weather in that regard.
I'd like to ask a question, I guess, here. You mentioned the sketcher. It's come up a couple of times. When the sketcher's sketching a cave, what kind of equipment or is it typically done on the waterproof notebooks, or are they using any digital recording devices?
Yeah. So certainly the tried and true method is just pencil and paper. So you plot out the vectors using a protractor on your sketchbook, and then you're looking, you might have a disto or something with you, but we have a whole symbol library, and we have map legends and things that describe these symbols on the maps to represent everything from bedrock and mud and gravel, sand, but also things like flowstone, stalagmites, stalactites, and so forth. And so you have a whole symbol library, not unlike a surveyor learning their codes for their data collector, that represent different things in the local cave environment. And so it's the sketcher's role then to plot all that stuff out in a relative fashion to the baseline that was collected through the instrumentation. Now, I mentioned this is sort of changing and evolving with technology. And so on one extreme, you have sort of the pencil and paper. On the other extreme of that, you have terrestrial LiDAR scanning, where people are taking actual LiDAR units into caves and scanning the entire cave. Now, scanning and mapping are two different domains. They're not the same. And so, again, what is it you're trying to produce is the final product. And can the map be a derivative of the LiDAR scan? And so this is sort of current thinking is like, how do I extract a meaningful two-dimensional map from the three-dimensional LiDAR data that I collected? Because you can see it, but it turns out to be a little more complicated than that to extract those features in a way that they are helpful and make sense in a two-dimensional map. And so, that's where we get into conversations on data collection and fit for purpose. Just because I can do the big, fancy, complicated LiDAR scan doesn't necessarily mean I want to do that, because I might not have a use case for it. And so then how do I develop something and come back a couple steps from LiDAR and say, okay, here's what I really need. I need an automated instrument that'll do this for me. And some of that thing gets also to the final product. What are you trying to produce? And anybody who's still doing cartography today knows that for better or worse, paper's still king, which means that your final products need to be able to be printed and viewed on paper. And that, of course, is a very different thing than digital native. So if the use case is that whatever you're drawing and whatever you're representing will forever be digital, and it doesn't need to have any considerations for ever being printed out on paper or to a PDF file or something, then you can have a different set of design criteria. But for now, for the foreseeable future, I've been at this for over 30 years. People keep telling me the paper is going away, but I still have to buy more and more paper for the plotter because people need paper maps than digital ones.
Yeah, I always feel there's a little difference between mapping and modeling. You know, the mapping
100%.
is
Yeah.
going to be on one of your paper side. The modeling definitely, 3D allows you to build that model to get more of a sense of the
Yeah.
environment, not just
I
where
think,
things are at.
you know, I think I think you're 100% correct. And I think there's a convergence of those two domains over time, but I don't think we're anywhere close to it just because they have different use cases. I think the most likely outcome, as I said, is that maps become a byproduct or a derivative of LiDAR data, whatever scanning data you're using. I'm sure there'll be some technology after LiDAR as well. But one of the things that you're constantly battling in a cave environment, of course, is that you can't see everything at once. You don't have the benefit of all things being lit up. And of course, the way a lot of LiDAR works currently and for the foreseeable future is that it's really taking a XYZ reflectance return as a discrete point, XYZ, and then it's taking a photo and then it's matching those two things up to create the visual point cloud. Well, what happens whenever you don't have all the pictures? Or if you did have pictures, maybe they're not evenly lit, you have dark spots and things like that in your scene, it becomes a little more tricky to do. And so I think those are some of the areas where there's still research being done today.
Yeah, I can imagine there's technology that's going to come down the way that's going to change the way we think, as it is with any industry. So let's kind of take it out to the next step. Then you collect all this data, then you're going through there and you get these sketches and stuff. You get out of the cave. How do you take the next step?
This is the life and times of a cartographer, right? Is that just because we're done collecting data in the field doesn't mean we're done drawing them out. And anybody who's ever been a survey tech or been a GIS professional knows this. Is that in many regards, the work's just starting whenever you get back to the office or back home. And so you have to take all those field notes that you collected and now turning them into something meaningful, something that's usable by people other than yourself, right? So how do you take a data set and turn it into something that people who aren't as familiar with the data set, that aren't experts at the data, can still interpret the data, right? And this is the profession.
Like a whole new language for other people.
It is. And so it's the profession of cartography, really, when you stop and think about it. How am I going to take, even going back to the 16th, 17th century, imagine yourself getting these ship logs and these rudimentary maps from ship captains that have sailed across the Atlantic into the Pacific, into an archipelago like the West Indies or the Galapagos Islands, and you get all these just crazy half-drawn scraps back from people who were there a year and a half ago, and now you're told to draw these into some sort of coherent map that can be used for navigation. So people are going to set sail across the ocean based on your map and your understanding of what somebody else gave to you that's many years old already, and was collected probably under less than ideal conditions. And so you find that in all areas of cartography, but certainly in caving, when we draw cave maps, these are labors of love that have hundreds, if not thousands of hours put into drafting and to redrafting and understanding these complex underground 3D environments. So a basic cave map would have three elements. They would have a plan, a profile, and cross sections of all the cave passages. And so this three combinatory play of these three items would allow us to understand the true complex nature of the underground on features that we're trying to map. And you might be able to do that on one sheet of paper. It might be an atlas. It might be several sheets of paper stitched together. We printed out the Mammoth Cave map a couple of times. Even at like an inch equals 50 feet, that map is 60 feet by 60 feet when it's printed out. And so you have to display it on the floor of a gymnasium. And people, can walk around on with their socks looking at all the various cave passages, because that's the scale that it takes to represent the world's longest cave. Where other caves may be on a half sheet of paper because they're 200, 300 feet long, and they're really not that complicated. So You can imagine the amount of time it takes to look at something like that. You can see, well, right in front of me here, as I sit here and I talk to you, I have a 40-inch wide monitor, primarily for cave cartography, so that I can see a bigger section of the cave at one time. I'm trying to draft it out because I know whatever's happening on my monitor ultimately needs to be printed on paper. And I need to understand what that's going to look like on paper. And again, I'll use the example of the GIS technicians that, if you're working on the entire city plan and you're working in one little area, we all have a story about when we printed it out. It didn't look anything like what we thought it was going to look like. And we wound up and had to iterate through that. Still do that in cartography, of course, but we're trying to minimize the times that we have to print out things and review them and so forth. So it's definitely something that takes a tremendous amount of time, well above and beyond the data collection in the field. The data collection in the fields is the super exciting, sexy part of it. That's the fun stuff, but the backside of that is all the office work that goes into sitting behind the computer, reducing survey notes and certainly drafting them in.
And it's very meaningful work. It might not be as sexy as you said, but it's very meaningful. It's what carries on to go to the next stage, I guess.
Right. So it facilitates future exploration. It facilitates science. It facilitates any number of different things on how that map can be used. But you can't do any of those things until you have the map. And
Right.
so that's the part that's, I think, a little bit different than, say, survey mapping or GIS even, is that everything that we work on the surface, there's at a minimum, there's a Google Earth image of it, or there's a topographic map of it, or there's something that we could go and look at. That's not the case for caves. Like, you're going into complete unknown. You're going into a complete blank slate. And so how are you going to represent it? What's going to make your work meaningful and resonate with a map viewer, the people that really need to rely on you forward in order to do their work?
So I'm going to kind of tie this into the next piece here. You've mentioned a couple times GIS. We talked about sketching. Can you give us a sense of, is there other software that you use to model these caves? And then how do you use GIS? And is there, what's the tie between them?
Sure. So, the most basic sense, what you want to know is, how did the things that are underground that we can't see relate to the things above ground that we can see? And so we would call this an overlay. And so how do I merge all of this three-dimensional line fall with all the different geospatial layers on the down from the surface, so I can say, okay, let's not build a road there because that'll be over the top of the cave, or let's make this development, or we need to drill a well for drinking water and avoid the cave so it doesn't get contaminated, recycled. So it's used in everyday decisions and planning decisions, but it might also be, hey, we noticed there's some pollution in the cave. Where could that be coming from? Oh, well, we noticed that there's this agricultural thing over here. It could be causing, or there's a chemical thing over here that might be not, let's have a spill or something. And so that's the primary use case, I think, between the two, is to understand relationships about, above and below ground. But it can get much more complicated than that as well. Like I said, we may use those on all available data for continuing exploration. Where's the cave likely to go? Or we may know where the cave ends underground, but it's not close to the spring yet. So we want to find a way to try to connect those two things. And so it really does depend on the use cases, but there's any number of ways that you can bring the geospatial information in. So again, most of the off-the-shelf software is not really capable of reducing and managing cave data because of the three-dimensional nature of it. And so we've had, as a caver community, we've had a couple of very talented programmers over the years that have helped to write very highly customized, from scratch survey software that can deal with the kind of data that we need to use. Some of those programs have been in use for more than 50 years now. Some of them are being, reimagined as we speak to incorporate 3D, to incorporate some of the newer technologies and capabilities. But again, these are labors of love that people aren't really being paid to do, but they see they have a particular talent for programming and they want to give back to the Kiva community and provide tools that allow not only others to further exploration, but they're usually into exploration themselves. And so they're developing these tools for their own use as well.
Interesting. So I'm going to take that we'll go to the next step. It's just like every piece has got a little bit, it takes us a little bit further here.
Yeah.
And it's all very interesting things you don't think about. When we talk about at the beginning, it's like mapping a city is much different than a cave. And,
Yeah.
As someone that doesn't map caves, we can only imagine what that would involve to do such a task. To really understand it, it's great to hear this process. I guess, where do you see, we mentioned technologies that are being used right now. Where do you see things going in the future? What kind of advances do you think there might be? And or are there some that are coming out that you're just waiting for?
Technology is evolving at a nice pace within the caving community. A lot of the technology is not proven. I think the challenge and the trade-offs in caving and kidnapping have to do with the robustness of the gear. So imagine being like, when I was on an expedition years ago in Laos over in Southeast Asia, and we had all these grand plans to take a Windows tablet or Android tablet or something like that over there, and we go way out into the jungle, no Wi-Fi, not even electricity really. And we unpack the tablet, we turn it on, and the tablet wants to run an update on the operating system. It was worthless for the whole expedition, So we carried this tablet halfway around the world, took it out in the jungle. We were going to survey, use it to reduce the survey minutes. So this is going to be fantastic. We'll be able to plot it all out, see any mistakes, and fix those before we go. Nobody anticipated that it was going to try to run a system update, right? And so things that you just don't think about in those more hostile environments, or you buy an electronic instrument that's the size of a pack of cards that's going to do all this fancy data collection for you. Somebody drops it on the way to the cave, it bounces off of a rock, the glass is shattered. Does it work? Or maybe somebody drops it in the water, it's fried. So now is it really going to kill the whole trip? Do you have some backup plan? Technology is really nice when it works, but when it doesn't work, a lot of times we find ourselves working for the technology. The technology is not working for us anymore. Right. And then again, that's true in survey and mapping, how many days, people spent trying to calibrate or trying to get, a data collector to work correctly or something like that. I know this thing's supposed to work. It's really cool when it does work, but it's not working right now. And the thing about caving is that the primary expense in all of this is mobilizing all the people in the gear to get to the cave. And so you want to make sure you're doing whatever you can do in the field while you're in the field. Everything else that can be done in the office, do that in the office. But you want to optimize for your time in the field. And part of that optimization is the redundancy and making sure you've got a backup plan if plan A doesn't work. And sometimes that's easier, sometimes that's harder, like being halfway around the world in the jungle. But you always want to make sure you've got a backup plan, to make sure you're getting the highest quality data out of the cave every single time you go in, not just because of the expense, but also understanding that caves are essentially non-renewable resources. That if you damage a part of that cave, for all practical purposes, in your lifetime and probably the future generations, that's forever damaged. And that's why we don't touch formations. We certainly don't break them off, because those are permanent conditions, though, for all practical purposes. Yes, they may repair themselves in 1,000 years, but who cares? So we sort of adopt a credo: take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints, kill nothing but time. And and leave the resources in good or better shape than how you found it. And that sometimes means paying a little bit of extra attention to what you're doing and not just stay on the trail. Don't wander off. Don't do things unnecessarily. Don't kick the rock just because you're bored and you want to kick a rock. But really being a very mindful participant in these fragile environments, both geologically and biologically, and this is the conversation that always comes up around things like endangered species. Yeah, there's a little snail that's in the water. It's as big as my fingernail. Nobody really cares if it disappears from the earth. Okay, fair enough. But what they're not telling you is that that snail, if it can't live in the water, there's something wrong with the water. And now, if you're getting your drinking water, and about 60% of the people in our area get their drinking water out of the ground, is that now it's going to make you, it's going to make your kids, it's going to make your grandkids sick. So you don't have to care about the snail. If what you care about is not people in your house not getting sick, then let's clean up the underground water resources. We know if the snail can live in the water, then the water's also okay to drink.
That's very interesting thought right there.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you 3 more questions here. So I could ask you questions all night, but I'm going to try to limit it here. So
Sure.
the number 1 is going to be, do you have a favorite cave that you like going back to? The other one is going to be, do you have any projects coming up that you're looking forward to? And I guess the third one is, is there a particular club, or where can people find more information if they want to maybe look into this? And is the data that you guys collect, so if you have, particularly, we're a geospatial podcast here, I'm going to go, is there any geospatial data for caves that people can access?
Favorite cave? I think, certainly there have been a number of unique experiences you might imagine over the last 3 decades. I don't know that I could point to one single event or experience that's my favorite. There are some caves here in the Midwest that are very near and dear to my heart, but there are some caves that I've been fortunate enough to visit, National Park Service system and global, that are also spectacular. And I think it's the experiences, not only in the locations you're at, but with the team that you're with and the people you're with, that make those experiences special and make them what they are over time. And so I really, that might be feeling a little philosophically, but that's sort of how I started to think about that some 30 plus years on into Cape. Project work, I have a major project to document all the caves in the Galapagos Islands. And we've been going down there for about 15 years, surveying caves, discovering caves. They're not, in the grand scheme of things, they're not super big or super long caves. They might be on the order of a couple miles long, or they might be on the order of 200, 300 feet deep. But they're not going to compare with the world's deepest. They're not going to compare with the world's longest or anything like that. But the Galapagos is a really special place. And
a lot of diversity there.
A lot of diversity, a lot of things that are unknown to science. And really just a fantastic place to do field work. And to hopefully add to the scientific record at the same time. So I think that's probably where the bulk of my efforts are right now in caving, although I'm involved in some local projects here and there as well. And then the third question around getting more involved, I'd say connect with some of those resources in the show notes. I mentioned one caving club here locally in the St. Louis region called Merrimack Valley Grotto, or NVG. That's a great group of folks, 100 people that get together once a month and they give talks on recent cave projects, schedule trips, outings, things like that for both new and experienced cavers. And just a really great place to make friends and long-term connections that are equally passionate about caves and cave exploration. So again, just check out some of those show notes and get connected.
And then I know I kind of snuck another one in there. Was is there data sets that people can access?
Oh, sure. So cave data is usually accessed through these communities. And the reason for that is that, again, it's data that can be misused quite easily. And we're trying to protect non-renewable resources. So if somebody goes in and damages a cave, puts graffiti in the cave, I'm always amazed at the number of beer cans that people can carry into a cave full, but can't carry them out empty. But, we do have, unfortunately, a number of stories where caves have been vandalized that have led to either permanent damage or changes in management. Caves have been closed by people and things like that. They've really just seemingly gone out of their way to do bad things to these environments, unfortunately. And sometimes we need to protect caves for endangered species like bats and other reasons too. So I think the best way to get access to the data is to get involved in these communities to contribute, and you'll find people are more than willing to share data with you.
Well, very interesting. I know I've enjoyed this talk immensely, and I could probably think about 2 other dozen questions I'd like to ask you. But for time's sake, we'll save that maybe for part 2 and 3, and we'll see about that. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about this. I think it's interesting that we get a chance to share not just, maybe how people got involved with geospatial and, the technologies being used, but understanding how people are using and applying technology, especially in the geospatial realm. And this is one people don't think a lot about. Typically we're thinking about what's on the earth. We've even heard that most of the oceans haven't been, there's a lot that's not been even explored or mapped there. But we don't hear a lot about the cave side. So I thought that was a very interesting topic to be able to share with listeners. So I really appreciate your time taking with us and your experience, sharing that experience that you've got. And, like you said, we'll share some of that information in the show notes so people can learn a little bit more about caving and also, learn about some of the safety precautions they need to take care of and also who to talk to. Well, with that, I'm going to wrap us up, I think, here, unless you've got anything else you'd like to add, Aaron.
No, I think it's been a pleasure talking about it. And I agree, I could talk about this for a long time. But it is a great place, for me to continue my practitioner experience with geospatial technologies, which allows me to see how they work in real world situations. And whether or not, it puts a little bit of credibility, I hope, behind what I'd say whenever I say, not only do I talk about these products and they have actual real world experience using them, it helps also keep me sharp on what the latest and greatest technologies are and how they can be applied in real world cases. Because if I can do it in these instances, I know I can do them above ground in mapping a city or digital twin or something. That's a very different use case that uses all the same methods and approaches. So thank you for inviting me, and hopefully this has been an interesting discussion for your listeners.
Oh, I'm sure it will be, because it has been interesting for me. So, well, with that, we'll end this episode, and maybe next time we'll talk about again, and maybe I'll have a chance to go out and map some caves with you or something. That'd be kind of cool.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. Well, take care, Aaron, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on the Spatial Connection. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. You can also follow us on social media and our website. Do you know someone with a fascinating geospatial story? If so, send us a message. We'd love to hear about them. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep exploring the world through the lens of geospatial technology.